Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. This show is brought to you in partnership with the Witherslack Group, experts in special education and care, and John Catt Educational, leading publishers of books, directories, educational guides and magazines specifically aimed at schools in the UK and beyond. Enjoy the podcast.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, a leading publisher of books, directories, educational guides and magazines specifically aimed at forward-thinking schools in the UK and beyond. Have you checked out their latest releases? Don't miss out! Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading!
This episode of Teachers Talk Radio has been made possible with support from Witherslack Group, the UK's leading provider of SEN education and care. They're here to support you too through an ever-growing offer of free resources, including webinars, podcasts, articles, and events aimed at supporting teaching professionals like you. Visit their website at www.witherslackgroup.co.uk to find out more.
Hello and welcome to The Late Show on Teachers Talk Radio. Thanks very much for listening. This show, like all our shows, is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational and the Witherslack Group. In a moment, you're going to be joined by Lucy Neuburger for The Late Show on Tuesday nights.
It is Tuesday. It is The Late Show. You are back with me, Lucy Neuburger, and we're doing a roundup for the year. I'm hoping in a little while Mr. Mark Cratchley is going to join me to share his thoughts on some of the things that have gone down this year and look forward to what the edu trends, and I am going to try and make this hashtag take off again. It didn't work last year, but I'm going to see if it works again this year. What edu trends we can look forward to in 2023. But before we do all that, before we get started, before we kick off this evening, as is tradition, I feel compelled, as always, to take you through the highs and lows of my week, just to make you feel better maybe about your week. So, yeah. Although I have been keeping an eye on the weather in the UK, and it's been very snowy by the looks of it. I'm a little bit worried if I'm going to be able to fly back to the UK next Monday, but I think by then it should be fine. It should be okay. But it is funny. It does make me laugh every time it snows in the UK. The entire place grinds to a halt, and we never learn, and it's just chaos raining. Speaking of rain, that's what's been happening here. Lisbon and the greater Lisbon area has never seen so much rain. It has rained, I think, almost entirely for near enough a week now. I mean, to the point where we're talking apocalyptic levels of rain. I mean, tropical rainstorm type rain that I've never seen anything like it. It was like a waterfall today at one point. And Lisbon and greater Lisbon are not built for dealing with lots of heavy rain. The flooding has been unbelievable, to the point where today Lisbon has actually been pretty much closed off. You can't get in or out. It's almost like COVID restrictions all over again. And it's been interesting times. I mean, certainly getting to work today has been quite difficult, and although back again wasn't so bad. And a lot of people have had flooding in their houses. A lot of buildings are underwater, a lot of underground car parks, things like that, restaurants, businesses. So it's been a little bit stressful in terms of that, but we press on, and Portugal's a very resilient country, and the Lisbonites are a pretty hardy bunch. So I'm hoping that and the Bombeiros, so the emergency services here, have been working tirelessly to ensure that, you know, we get sorted and we get back on our feet and that everything works again. So yeah, that's been interesting. What else has been going on? It is the final week of term for me. I'm very lucky in that I finish on Friday. I think quite a few people do, but as we've discussed before, A few others have the unfortunate experience of finishing on not Friday week, sorry, so on the 23rd. I've just seen Mr. Mark Cratchley pop in, so we will get to chat to him in a moment. Hi, Mark, glad to have you here. And it looks like some others are going to pop in as well, so that's lovely too. Yeah, so final week of term, it has been completely chaotic so far. A lot of the children in my class have already disappeared on holiday. A lot of them are from Brazil and places like that, so they tend to leave a little bit earlier so that they can maximize their time away. I mean, lucky them, hey? And I am sort of clinging on to timetable just about at this point. I mean, yes and no. I did do a reading comprehension today, but only to calm my class down, because this morning I had them doing kind of various bits of sort of Christmas math. I know, but all that kind of stuff. And my head teacher walked in to quite a chaotic scene of sort of children all engaged, all busy, all doing things. None of them were doing the same thing. And we had Christmas songs on, but people were busy. Anyway, I think he left me to it. I think he thought maybe it's just safer to let her carry on. So so if you are listening to this, head teacher, I apologize for any chaos you witnessed today, but they had a lovely time, so all good. What else has been going on? We've been song rehearsing, so we've got our little Christmas bazaar on Thursday afternoon. And quite honestly, I am not cut out for any kind of theatre directing. This is what I've learned. So if I do ever end up teaching in year 6 and have to do a year 6 production, I honestly wonder what's going to become of me, because this one song, or rather this mashup that we're doing of Silent Night and Merry Christmas Everyone, it does work, I promise, in a weird way. It's honestly, we've got some children who still don't know the steps, the kind of dance routines. Some are turning one way, some are turning the other. They are not smiling. It's honestly, I really hope that when they get on that stage on Thursday that they're just going to enjoy it. It's Christmas jumper day that day as well, so they'll be all kind of dressed up in their jumpers, and hopefully the festivities will kind of seep into their veins. This is coming from Mrs. Grinch herself, but it will seep into their veins and will make them cheery and happy and wonderful, and then we can all go off into the holidays and have a lovely time. In terms of other gossip and other things going on, I don't think there is anything else really. I think it's just everybody clawing their way to the end of term, and you are nearly there, and especially kind of solidarity to those of you who are pushing through until the 23rd. You've got it in you, you can do it. Just have everything, try and stay as on timetable as you can and have lots of activities ready to go, and just keep those kids occupied. And if you do end up resorting to watching a Christmas film, I don't think there's anything wrong with that in an afternoon. So what? They've done well. I think they have done well. And something we'll touch on later on in the show is the impact of COVID, and now that we're back in school, kind of what does that look like, or what has that looked like this year? So I think it's important to acknowledge and to use this time of year to reflect as well for ourselves, not just about the children, but for us as well, to see how far we've come and what we've and how resilient, I don't like that word, but you get the point, how resilient we've all been, because we've been through a great deal everybody has in the last few years. So anyway, without further ado, I think we should bring on Mr. Mark Cratchley, and I can see that he is there. Mark, are you there?
Hello, I am.
Good evening, sir. How are you doing?
Good evening. Pretty good. You all right?
Yeah, I'm all right. Thank you for joining me this evening. But just, I know that you've sort of popped in and out of shows before, but just for those who maybe are not familiar with who you are, could you please give a brief introduction to who you are and your current role in education?
Yeah, of course. So I am an English teacher in secondary. I'm in my 4th year now, and I used to teach in primary. I was an unqualified teacher in primary, teaching mostly PPA, and I taught abroad for 12 years. 12 years as well. I can't remember now, so it was a long time ago, but yeah.
Yes.
So teaching for over 20 years, basically, in various forms, in all kinds of forms, basically.
Yeah, you've had quite the teaching adventure, and I think you're very well placed to guide me through our 2022 revisit and looking forward to 2023. Now, I've got lots of bits and pieces here in front of me, and I haven't briefed you on any of this, Mark, so it's kind of what comes to you and your thoughts on this. And we're going to, as always with my shows, we're going to kind of go off all over the place and look at a variety of things, some serious, some maybe less serious. So brace yourself. I hope you're ready. And I've seen a few more have joined us. I've seen that Ms. W. Denan is here. Hello, Woody. Lovely to have you. I've seen Peter is in as well. And hopefully a few more will join in when they see that we're doing a year roundup, and they might want to share their thoughts as well. So, Mark, I hope you're ready. First things first. Now,
there's nothing like being put on the spot, is there?
Well, I think you'll have thoughts on these things, and to be honest, see how you go. So, the first thing that kind of came to mind for me this year was actually nothing to do with the whole COVID side of things. We'll come back to that. Was actually, I was trying to think, and this is more from a UK point of view, just how many education secretaries we've got through in recent times. Do you know what the actual number is?
I've given up counting, to be honest with you. I've got no idea. It's got to be at least half a dozen, surely, in the last couple of years.
You're not far off. Do you know who the current education secretary is?
To my shame, I don't.
So it's somebody called, and this is a Schools Week article on her. This is somebody called Gillian Keegan. Okay.
Right, okay.
And she is lucky number 5. So at the time of this article was written, which was October. So I think it's still Gillian Keegan. I'd be really embarrassing if I'm wrong, but I'll blame the fact that I've lived out of the country for a while. So at time of writing, it is Gillian Keegan, or was Gillian Keegan, but I think she is still in the role. So she was the 5th to serve in the role in 4 months, the 6th in 14 months, there you go, and the 10th since the Conservatives came to power in 2010. So 10 education secretaries in 12 years.
That kind of is a very good picture of perhaps why the current education system is in the state it's in, isn't it?
Yes, and I think this dominated the headlines this year. I mean, not so much the education side of things, but more the fact that Boris Johnson finally left his post, was finally toppled. But then we've also done 3 prime ministers this year? 3, yeah.
Yes.
So
yeah.
It's sort of a mark of a wider problem, let's say. But there's sort of a lot to say about Gillian Keegan, actually. I mean, even though I don't know if you'd heard of her. Well, you couldn't name her, but had you heard of her prior to this?
No, again, I'm afraid not. I'm Googling her now, so.
Furiously Googling as I put you on the spot. Well, just some fun facts for you that I've got here. She left school at 16, making her the first education secretary to have done so since Alan Johnson. She then did an apprenticeship at Delco Electronics. And she was sponsored to study a degree at Liverpool John Moores. She's got a degree in business, and she did a master's degree. It doesn't say in what, but at the London Business School. She has also lived and worked abroad, so much like you and I both have. In 2019, she accused the government of playing catch-up on mental health services for children, and she says schools have a vital role in offering support and spotting the signs of when people need help, which, I mean, we know full well that there was a mental health crisis before COVID, but certainly in the wake of that and within schools, there is definitely, and I don't know if you've noticed this year, a lot of mental health that has come to the forefront for students and for staff. I don't know if there's anything that sort of has particularly stuck out to you at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the biggest thing seems to be the waiting list for students to see counsellors. The demand has obviously increased, and unfortunately, the waiting lists are phenomenal at the moment. It's a really long wait for students who are really in need of help, and there's just aren't the resources or facilities there for them to receive the help that they need.
Oh no, most definitely. I mean, I get asked quite regularly whether there's a counsellor who's kind of on the school staff, and as much as that would be a lovely thing, it's just not realistic and not feasible. So we're doing, or have done this year, a lot of work in class, in both the classes I've had in this year, January to December, because of course I realised that we've spanned 2 academic years, or parts of 2 academic years. But it's definitely been noticeable, certainly from the primary side, that yes, the mental health side, but also the social side, the just kind of the sort of the immaturity in terms of relating to one another socially, and the idea of actually still being in class together again. It really, I still feel I'm rebuilding that with these children, despite the fact that we have been back in class for a while now. It's been a very funny time in terms of teaching year 5 now, for example, is not teaching year 5 2 or 3 years ago. It's very, very clear that although they're at that age where biologically they're maturing, and hormones have kicked in or starting to, but socially they're just not there. There's a huge mismatch between the two, and I don't know if it's as noticeable in secondary.
It is, absolutely, yeah. I think this year, I don't know if I'm getting used to it perhaps a little bit, but certainly last year it was really noticeable. Particularly I noticed with the year 8s last year, because they missed out on the end of they missed out on most of their year 6 and their year 7 as well. So in a way they were, as you would expect a year 5 class to behave. So that was the most noticeable. But further up through the school as well, it's become really clear that it's continued and it hasn't really been resolved. And I think it's going to take another, maybe 2 or 3 years before it really is back to how things were before the lockdown.
Oh, definitely. Lockdowns, yeah. I mean, we definitely did multiple lockdowns out here as well. And I think that this has to be acknowledged. I mean, certainly with teachers I've spoken to lower down in primary who are teaching kind of year 2, year 3, and are noticing things like their reading ability is much lower than they've dealt with in the past. A large part of that due to the fact that they weren't doing phonics in school. And yes, we've said time and time again that teaching online did happen, and teachers absolutely did that to the best of their ability, but it still was not the same thing as being in class. And so particularly for those very young children as well, who missed out on that really kind of formative early stage of schooling, they haven't caught up yet, and they haven't quite got they're not even close in some cases to the reading ability that they should have at the end of year 2 or the end of year 3.
No, I think it was a problem before lockdown as well. From what I can remember when I was working in primary, sort of 4 or 5 years ago now, and as part of my role, I would be working in reception. The reception teachers were saying even back then, sort of 4 or 5 years ago, that the level and the social skills, the level of oracy skills, literacy skills as well, and social skills were rapidly showing signs that they weren't the same as they had been sort of a few years previously. So I think that decline was kind of compounded as well then with the lockdown on top of that. So it's something that was perhaps an issue beforehand, and then the lockdowns just exacerbated it as well.
Yeah, and I still, I think that this is going to be, I mean, we talk about sort of generations, Gen X, Gen Z, all that kind of thing. But I worry about this generation of kids being labeled the COVID generation, and this hangover, or whatever you want to call it. Maybe hangover is definitely the wrong word, but this sort of thing that's kind of so much part of our subconscious and our recent times, that I think that this is going to be part of teachers' careers and watching their students for a long time to come. But
absolutely, I think what you said earlier as well about the lack of in-school counsellors or in-house counsellors is something that it's a role that teachers have had to adopt themselves. It's something that it's certainly been a larger part of our responsibilities and duties over the last the last year and a half or so since coming back. It's something that there's been much more of a shift than perhaps in the time and the efforts expected in the pastoral care. Yeah, I was going to say as well. So yeah, what you were saying about the lockdown effect. So further up the school, I was just chatting the other day to a couple of my year 11s, top set year 11 English set, and one of them just blurted out. We were just having a bit of a conversation. One of them just blurted out, said, "Well, I used to be smart before lockdown." So the impact on the kids and their self-esteem and their efforts and how they view themselves as well. It's going to take a long time for that to recover.
Yeah, I think so. And it's interesting because I mean, I've never heard, I mean, we've always talked about teacher tired, and it's always been kind of a bit of a running joke, certainly in that first the first term of any year. But this year, kind of 2022, sort of just when we were kind of coming out of sort of the back end of 21 into 22, and people, things were starting to adjust properly again. The kind of burnt out tiredness of teachers seemed to be talked about even more, and I don't know if this was just because I saw it all over Twitter, but it was next level tired. And I don't know if maybe having to, I mean, we wear many hats anyway, it's just it's part of the job we do. We know that going in. But do you think that maybe having to take on that extra pastoral element, and as well as all the catch up we're doing, everything else has just kind of, people are just tapped out at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think so about this time last year, I said people think, well, we're feeling like we're on our knees now, but if we remember back to 12 months ago, I think it was even worse, to be honest with you. Coming back in that September after all the kind of easing back into it to a degree after the lockdown in 21, it just felt it felt relentless. It was like, right, okay, back to normal. We're going to hit the ground running. And nobody was ready for it. I don't think any school was ready for it, any teachers or students, and it's just been exhausting. And I think if we continue at this pace, then we've already seen, haven't we, that the amount of teachers who are wanting to leave, the lack of uptake in new teachers as well coming into the profession, that is a real clear indication, I think, of how things are, the state of things at the moment.
And it
I
seems
don't think you're
that
doom and gloom on this, but it's
no.
it's kind of
We will
it's
perk
just
up. I promise we will perk up. But I think it's important to. It sounds so dire. Honestly, I think Rogers thinks I'm doing this on purpose. That my kind of my whole Grinch attitude to Christmas, I'm just trying to seep it into everything and make everybody sad. I'm really not. I promise you, it will pick up. And there are actually some things in here that I think will be really good when. Well, in amongst all my bits of paper that I'm sitting around, there are some sort of more upbeat or more, well, I don't know if they are. Well, we'll get to it and you can see what you think. You can
okay. Well, I think
judge me on it as it comes up.
all right. I think the silver lining is though that the sense of camaraderie. And you said the word resilience earlier, which you don't know, but I think it really has shown through. And there's that that feeling. I think over lockdown it was kind of quite prevalent as well. Do what you can, and I think now we're starting to sort of draw the line a little bit as well. I mean, there's what was the phrase or the term that's been bandied around recently? Is it quiet quitting? I think it's just kind of drawing a line and saying, actually, no, I'm not going to exceed expectations. I'm not going to go above and beyond what it is. I'm going to do what I need to do, and I think it's becoming more acceptable to do that rather than have to, be all bells and whistles all the time and working all through the night and all through the weekend. I think people are actually sort of starting to sort of draw a line now and say, look, we don't have to be doing this. We can say no to things. And like I said, there seems to be well, certainly in my school at least anyway, there's a very strong camaraderie and support amongst the teachers.
Yeah, and I think, and I would say the same for my side as well. There was definitely people were checking in on each other. People people did band together. But do you think there's been, from sort of any of the kind of educational bodies or or the government, and I can sort of predict where your answer will go with this, but go with me anyway, just an acknowledgement of kind of where we are in terms of education at this point, and the fact that actually this idea that we can just catch up and pretend that nothing happened. I mean, it seems like Ofsted are back with a vengeance as well. We've talked. I mean, that's been another theme throughout this year, certainly in the UK, in terms of they're marching around like nothing ever happened. But of course, they've had their own various controversies, as we know. But it just seems that it's almost that, certainly in the UK at least, that kind of keep calm and carry on attitude is
Yeah.
trying to be pushed through. But I don't feel that that's working. Certainly not from people I've spoken to, and certainly not from from my side either.
No, it feels like it's going to crack. I mean, we had Ofsted. Was it October? I think just a couple of weeks before half term. And to be honest with you, it was kind of a relief because we'd been on high alert for an entire year. So the September previously, we were told, right, we're due a visit. They should be here any time. And we had a whole year of that. So it was nice to be, once they'd been and gone, there was a kind of a sense of relief, certainly. But I think, I think the government basically they missed a golden opportunity to have a huge revamp and overhaul of the whole education system. And we've already seen in some subjects where, after lockdown, we're saying, well, okay, we're going to remove this section from the exam because it's too much. It's like in English, for example, I think it was the unseen poetry, or there was certainly one of the poetry questions was removed. For the lockdown exams, and it's just, I think it's perhaps we need to sort of really properly have a look at how overcrowded a lot of the specs are for secondary school, for GCSE particularly, and for A level. There's a lot of content to teach, and if we kind of if you miss a week or if you miss a few days or something, even then you're playing catch up. And even if you can do everything and you're whizzing through, you can't deliver and you can't learn to a degree where it's quality. It's just, it seems to be right. You need to learn this, and this, and it's very kind of short term. It's not a long term impact. It's Gove's legacy, basically. I think, isn't it? It's that kind of rote learning for the sake of learning, rather than any kind of real value in it. For me personally, anyway. That's how I feel about it. It feels like there's too much to do. There's not the critical thinking skills. There's not time to enjoy the subject quite so much as well. It's quite certainly some of the aspects in my subject in English language are very dry. So it just feels like there was a missed opportunity to perhaps have a really good look at it and a bit of an overhaul of some of the subjects.
And do you feel that opportunity maybe is still there, or do you feel we're in grave danger going into 2023 and sort of moving forward as we're desperately trying to in many ways? Do you feel that we can still kind of say, hang on a minute, actually we can still change things here? There's still an opportunity to look back. Maybe not enough time has passed yet to look back and say, what did we learn during lockdown? Because it comes up a lot, but as you say, I don't think people, and I'm going to use a phrase that people hate, have unpacked it enough and actually looked in great enough depth to say, how can I heard that. I thought you were I could hear you frowning at me then.
No, not at all.
But yeah, we haven't had a chance to actually unpack it and look at it and say, actually, is this syllabus fit for purpose? I mean, I don't teach secondary, so this is not my area of expertise by any stretch of the imagination. I know there's some secondary teachers in the mix this evening. I can see a couple that are in there already who would, if you want to leap in and correct me on anything, please do not sit there raging at me for getting things wrong. But yes, I mean, I certainly, from people I have spoken to, there are texts and bits and pieces and things that were doing the rounds 15 years ago when I did my GCSEs, or a bit longer than that, 16, 17 years ago now. And I think, oh, come on, really? Surely it's time to move on a bit.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was at the school I was at previously, so the head of department there, he went to one of the meetings where heads of department will go, and it's the exam board, and they're deciding on the text that they're going to use for the curricula, for the spec for the exams and stuff. And it does seem to be very kind of stuck in their ways. That they do seem to be, we've got all these resources on this text, and we've been doing it for years, and it's served us well. So we know how to examine this, we know how to mark this, we know how to grade this. And there doesn't seem it's from that level. I think that's where it needs to change, and I don't know if we can do that from grassroots or whether it has to come from above. But it seems to be kind of stuck there in the middle. with these exam boards. And they're saying that there are some boards now that are doing more in terms of trying to make the curriculum more diverse, but it does seem to be a very slow process. So I don't know how that change is going to come about. I think it will. I'm positive and optimistic that it will come about. I think it's necessary. Just how soon or which direction that pressure is going to come from, it's a bit hard to say at the moment. But like I say, there are examples that are changing, they are developing, they are introducing more diverse and modern texts as well. So,
well, you've just drawn my eye to one of the articles that I printed off, which is actually from Independent Education Today, which sort of kind of piggybacks onto this, where it says that, you know, this was actually talking about trends in 2022, so not looking forward as such, but what they say here, or one of the points they make, is knowledge-based curriculums are no longer enough, and it's become apparent that that they are no longer enough, and the propensity for a skills-based method is not fit for purpose. Schools are now finding a balance between the two and are teaching knowledge-rich curriculums, which also develop essential skills for life. It's now far more acceptable to see the importance of this approach rather than simply preparing children to pass exams at whatever age. Without a doubt, this will continue to be a debate going forward. The challenges of 2021 have been well documented, and schools have coped incredibly well. But right now, there's things like, anxious and disgruntled parents, students who've been let down by the system, as we know, particularly in the UK. Nothing substitutes being in school, but real problems stem from lack of socialization and being part of school community. But schools now need to think about how, they can kind of make sure that they're teaching, a broad and balanced curriculum, another favorite edu phrase that pops up from time to time. So I don't know if you want to comment on any of that at all, Mark. Oh, I lost him.
Mark, you're muted.
Oh, maybe he's done a runner, Rogers. I don't know. Maybe he got fed up. Anyway, I'll toddle on while he hopefully makes a reappearance. Oh no, he's there. Oh no, we've lost him. Hopefully Mark will be back with us in a minute. But I mean, in going on from this article, it also talks about so not only are there issues within. Oh, he's there. Mark,
hello. Yeah, I don't know what happened there. You went completely silent, and so I logged out and logged back in again.
Oh, fantastic! What was the last bit you heard? Just so I know where we were.
Where did we get to?
Did you hear the bit about knowledge-based curriculum?
Yes. Yeah, talking about a balance between knowledge and skill. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, would you say that's sort of in the broadest sense, the kind of the route we need to take going forward?
Yeah, I think so. It seems the sensible thing, doesn't it? There seems to be this kind of pendulum shift or swing between knowledge-based and skills-based, and the arguments toing and froing between the two. But it just seems to be that seems, there should be, or could hopefully arrive at a happy medium. I think there's value in both, and if you focus too much on one or the other, then it's at the loss of the students lose out, don't they? So, I mean, it's difficult. This came up in my interview question actually for when I got my job at the school I'm at. They say, do you prefer a knowledge-based or a skills-based curriculum? I thought, well, do you have to kind of choose between the two? Should not be one or the other. I mean, there are students who I know who are very eloquent when it comes to classroom discussions, and they've got a great source, they're very erudite. They've got a lot of knowledge about various texts and that kind of thing. But when it comes to writing about it, they're shocking. So they've got the knowledge, but they don't have the skills. So we need to. That's just an example of why we need to have a balance between the two.
Mm-hmm. And actually, this article goes on to say, and I've just seen, Woody, I think if it's this one you want me to share, I'll try and remember to share everything in my show notes, which I usually do on time, but I will make a concerted effort or a strong effort to do that this evening for you. Just going back to following on from this particular article, the next bit they sort of go on to say there's another bit I want to touch on that's actually further back, but I'm dotting about all over the place like I normally do, where the suggestion is that going forward, sort of in a kind of post COVID, like children must be at the front and center of everything we do. So things like, when we went into lockdown, the removal of sport, music, drama, and creative arts during school closures impacted children and parents negatively. And there's now a renewed thirst for children to be involved in learning new skills and growing confidence. And I think it is all these things, all the creative arts, all the trips and things that were a huge part of our curriculum pre-COVID. I mean, certainly we've made a big effort this year to try and get out of classes as much as we can, particularly, well, locally. I mean, that's kind of what we do. But I definitely feel that's a large part of what I missed in the previous 2 years. I don't know about you, Mark.
Absolutely, yeah. It's something I miss, and I think it's also something that people seem to forget. It's what kept a lot of people going during the lockdowns as well. The arts particularly, and sports as well. I mean, it's those things are what we turned to. We didn't turn to learning, I don't know, the present progressive tense, or we didn't turn to learning algebra or things. We turned to the National Theatre online. We turned to Joe Wicks. We turned to those things that could feed our souls, as well as, rather than looking at the knowledge-based things, wasn't it? It was much more skills-based in that.
Oh, most definitely. And just the last thing I want to touch on in this article, and it is a slightly, I don't know if it's a negative point, but it's certainly one that maybe because of the school environment that I operate in, it's perhaps maybe more noticeable. I don't know. You can see what you think about this, but I've noticed a lot more parental pressure it's certainly in 2022 than I've ever kind of noticed before, in terms of they are much more sort of engaged in terms of what's going on in school. I think because they were at home, or everybody was at home doing it for themselves in one way or another. And of course, we know there were varying degrees in how that operated in terms of parental availability, whether parents were around, safety at home, access. All these things played an enormous role. But certainly, yeah, I have noticed that, and I don't know if this is unique to the environment that I find myself in now, or whether this is across the board, that parents are far more invested, having had to do it themselves, and having seen had a sort of small insight into how education works, that they now want to be more involved day to day than they have been.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, I don't know. I think so. During lockdown, I was working at a grammar school, and I think those families were perhaps already quite invested in their students. I'm putting this very politely. They were very hands-on, then, shall we say, and very forthright in their expectations of the school and the teachers and their children's education. Which, of course, that brings about all kinds of pressures in itself anyway. And I think, again, they were kind of exacerbated by the lockdown in many cases. Since then, yes, perhaps, maybe, I don't know. I'm kind of, as a teacher parent, I see the WhatsApp group with the parents, and I kind of sometimes a bit conflicted. I have to kind of not get involved in the conversations that are going on, because that it wouldn't be professional for me to do that. And I don't know that it's any more or less, from what I've seen. I don't know that it's any more or less than it was before, to be honest with you.
No, that's fair enough. And I wonder whether from my side it's because we did 2 iterations, obviously, or 2 lockdowns, and they were both handled quite differently under different head teachers. And so I think there was a lot that played into what these parents were expecting from us, particularly as a fee-paying school, that they were very keen to ensure that children were occupied, that we were doing what we were meant to be doing, that we were accountable, and all the rest of it. And they do now, certainly now that Google Classroom is something that's regularly used and all the rest of it, I sort of, have noticed much more in the terms of communication, in terms of, if a homework is posted a day late or things like that. So maybe, again, that's sort of slightly more environment based rather than a general thing. So,
yeah, I think that is interesting. That you say it's a fee-paying school. I think that might be the difference. I know locally here there are 4 big private schools. We had some of our students leave our school during lockdown and they signed up to those schools because of the service that they were offering. They are expected to do more, I think, and because they were fee paying, so the demand perhaps was greater. Certainly in the first lockdown, anyway. The second lockdown, not so much, because we were doing pretty much the same sort of thing, but certainly in the first lockdown that happened.
Oh yeah, and I think that we as teachers are getting pressures from all angles, and I do think the pressure in general. I mean, the things we've touched on as well, more being kind of added to the role, sort of almost in a sort of subconscious way, rather than actively being told you must now make sure that we've always cared about our students' well-being, but that's now increased even more and things like that. It's just, I think there's just more, it seems. All the stuff that existed before, but it almost seems to have been magnified, certainly in the last year or so. But actually, another thing, this article is very useful. It does sort of say here, it's now the job of school leaders to ensure that staff workload is manageable and that they're not under unreasonable pressure, either internally or externally. For some, it's simply been too much, and they've reassessed their priorities and decided to leave that quiet quitting that you were alluding to as well. Most recently, though, it's been school leaders, and actually I've noticed this as well, who are not necessarily leaving, but are questioning whether, in the wake of everything, because there are many, many head teachers worldwide who were, working round the clock, trying to keep schools open as much as possible, trying to, support families, all the rest of it, and have just kind of come out the other side of it and are absolutely shattered and absolutely, in a way, broken, and are kind of reassessing whether they are able to run a school in the way that they would want to. I don't know if you've seen anything related to that at all, Mark.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think it is. It's obviously the pressure or the responsibility falls ultimately on the head, doesn't it? And all of the pressures that we feel as teachers, they have that sort of tenfold in a way. So I think that's I can see why that is the case. No, I agree. I think it's been, again, it just comes back to that idea, doesn't it? That perhaps a massive overhaul is needed. It really does need to be looked at properly, and changes need to be made because, you're right. There's certainly lip service for teachers' well-being in the schools that I've worked at, but there's still high expectations as well. So, the buzzwords are, teacher well-being, and we have well-being inset days now, which are fantastic. But at the same time, we're thinking, well, okay, it's all very well and good, but we're still having all these extra little bits added to our workload. So it's kind of give with one hand and take away with the other. So.
I'm going to caveat what you just said, and some are not going to like this. I think some well-being days are great, the likes of Charlie Burley and people like that, Teachers Health Coach, who I know has been a guest on Teachers Talk Radio before, I believe, with the delightful Tom Rogers. That well-being days like that are great, but then there are some that I have heard about that are just an almighty cringe fest, shall we say, and that's being tactful. I mean, I
want to hear the examples. What kind of thing have they had to do?
Schools that have got massage therapists in, I just think that's a bit weird. Would you want to get a massage at school?
No, I don't think so. Maybe not a massage. No. The ones we had last year, I think there was one of the parents was a yoga teacher. They came and taught us yoga. This year, I think the pottery session has sold out. It's been booked out. We've got training at the gym. We've got voice training, breathing training. It's all those kinds. It is kind of physical well-being, or more creative, then, shall we say? But at the same time, it's like, well, this is all lovely, but when are we going to have time to come into the pottery studio and throw down some clay once the term's up and running again? That kind of thing. It's a good idea in theory, but in practice, I don't know how practical it is.
I think they should take teachers axe throwing. Have you ever done that?
No, but I would absolutely love to do that.
It's really fun.
It sounds very, very therapeutic.
It is incredibly hazardous. I mean, I've there's a place in Lisbon, in somewhere called the LX Factory, which is it's kind of an American style sort of setup, so you can have burgers, cocktails, things like that. And then at the back, not shielded off in any way, it's just some kind of, they're almost like sort of mini bowling lanes, if you like, and you have a target and you just lob axes at them. Brilliant.
I'm not sure with booze that's such a good idea, but it's
No, I mean,
do
I've
that
been
first and then
twice.
drink.
Well, I've been twice, and everyone's left with all their toes and fingers. So, but do you know what? I think a great well-being thing for teachers, and maybe I should campaign for this. Is, have you ever seen those rooms where you can basically go into them and just smash stuff up?
Yes, yeah, I have heard about this. Yeah.
I promise I'm not deeply unhinged as I sound, but I think there is something very satisfying about breaking stuff. No, am I on my own here? I sound like a weirdo.
No, I agree.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
But
We need to get
like
people
that,
to give a hands up or a high five or some kind of heart or something if they agree.
yes, I think you should. So if you'd like to go into one of these smashy rooms or whatever they're called, breaky rooms, give a heart or a thumbs up. Don't leave me on. Oh, we've got an agreement from Francis. Lovely. Francis is making me feel, and he's a deputy head teacher as well, so I feel slightly more validated in my nutty approach to well-being. Oh, and Ms. Wilson as well has given a thumbs up as well. So thank you for that. I do appreciate it. I feel less like a complete nutter. Okay, Mark, I'm going to give you a moment to have a sip of whatever you are drinking, and then I'm actually going to look forward to the future. We're going to go in a futuristic direction. I think aspects of this are positive, but you can tell me what you think. These are some of the predicted trends for 2023 and beyond. So have a sip of something and come back to me in a moment. In the meantime, I'm going to tell
Okay,
you
as
very
long as it doesn't
quickly.
involve mini whiteboards, I'll be all right.
Oh, well, we haven't got onto the Twitter debacles. We'll get to that. I was going to save that till near the end, just in case we did cause mutiny here on TTR. But and also, I'm very conscious of the fact that admin might boot me off if I start to cause too much controversy. But as if I would. I mean, this is Tuesday evening. How much trouble can we get into, really? I mean, I don't know. I can get into lots of trouble, clearly. But anyway, while we're here, I should tell you about our lovely sponsors. We have got With a Slack Group, who are a leading provider of careers and wonderful things like that. Also, a leading provider of CPD as well. They have some fantastic CPD on their website, so you should go and have a look at that too. And also, if you're thinking about a career change, maybe have a look there as well. I'm hoping that admin are going to pin a tweet for me as well from them, so you can see more on that. We've also got John Catt, who are wonderful providers of. So if you're looking for a Christmas gift for the teacher in your life, you might want to have a browse through their things as well. So that is John Catt Education. And I've just seen something else that has been popped into the top of the space here, which is, have you checked out The Thinking Teacher by, oh goodness me, a name that I'm going to butcher, I'm really sorry in advance, Calvin Atwell. Sorry, just have a look at that. It offers current and reflective resource for teachers at every level who wish to transform their thinking and their practice in the classroom. And that is something that is available from John Catt. Fantastic. Good stuff. Good to know. What else have we got? Anything else exciting? Oh, you can see up there the speaking of highlights of the year and a flashback of 2022, With a Slack Group are also sharing their highlights of 2022. So if you want to go and have a look at that, you can as well. Okay, Mark, I'm hoping you're suitably refreshed and still with me, and that you haven't disappeared off somewhere.
No, I'm still here. I can still hear you. It's all good.
Because you said to me earlier that you've got mock exams calling you, and I hope that the cry isn't too loud and that we can keep you for a little bit longer.
No, I'm managing to muffle it quite successfully at the moment. So
I think it's mean that they make teachers do that at this time of year. It's just, mind you, I've had to just do a round of reports, so I don't know. Right.
yeah, it's
okay.
a necessary evil. It's got to be done.
It is. Right. Okay. So we've kind of looked back. We sort of circumnavigated all the various bits and pieces that have kind of made 22 2022, I can't even speak anymore, 2022, what it is. But now I think it's time to look forward into the future. And actually there's a surprising number of articles and things looking out to this. One of which is from Moonpreneur. That's an interesting portmanteau, but okay. Which is the top 13 education trends in 2023. Now, I don't know if we'll go through all of these. I've picked out some of my favorites and you can see what you think. And some of these actually match up to another thing I found, which is from what's it called? See, this is when you have too many bits of paper. From Trends Shaping Education as well. So a lot of this actually does match up. Right, so here we go. Let's have a look. So the first thing, something that I've definitely talked about in a past show, is gamification is going to become much more of a thing in 2023, gamification of learning. So educators are always trying to find new techniques and ways to approach learning. And gamification is a way of motivating students through elements of video game design. And it recreates some of the same factors in the classroom, incorporating elements from games to provide students with the opportunities to act autonomously and display competence. Mark, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm all for games. I love playing games in class, so I think that sounds like a good idea to me. I know the kids love things like Kahoot and Blookit and that kind of thing. The competitive, low stakes, multiple choice kind of questions where there's that repetition and consolidation of learning. So I think sounds like a winner.
See, I'm still on the fence with gamification. On the one hand, I get it completely. I completely understand how this has found its way into education. And in the same way you said, I understand that things like Kahoot, there's a plethora of stuff out there that we're already using that adds that element in. The other side to it, and again, anyone can leap in here if they want to share their thoughts on this or tell me that I'm wrong, by all means, is that I kind of feel in the wake of, and it's again something else I've talked about, in the wake of online learning and things like that, that attention span has become an issue. And I worry that if we go too far down the gamification route, because a lot of the time, I mean, I really try and make my lessons as engaging as possible. We all do. I mean, duh, we all do. And there are lessons where I've come away from and thought, okay, that was a bit of a damp squib. But there is a little bit of me that maybe resents the idea of, unless it goes whiz bang or kind of flashes brightly or kind of has that gamification element, that it's just not going to hold children's attention. So in using it, am I creating a trap where children are not going to be engaged or not going to be on board unless there is that element to a lesson? Or am I being cynical? I don't know.
I think it's the carrot and stick approach, isn't it? I think if you use it as some kind of like I said, as a retrieval exercise or something like that, if the whole lesson, whole scheme of work is based around games, then perhaps that's not going to be as successful. There needs to be input as well, doesn't there? There needs to be learning in a sense. Unless, I mean, you could have some kind of discovery games, I suppose, as well, where there's problem solving, that kind of thing. But again, it needs to be balanced, doesn't it? You can't have, it just needs to be, there needs to be balanced. And I think there is a place for it. I think it's already there, isn't it? We are already using it. And without wishing to bring up mini whiteboards again, that's one of their uses, isn't it? It's that quick concept checking, to making sure that the hinge questions, all of that kind of stuff. We can use mini whiteboards for those. We can use games. We can use Kahoot or Blookit for those as well. So it's there in place already, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I know that one of the Year 6 teachers at school was having a bit of a kind of tech hiatus, because Year 6 do have the use of Chromebooks at school, and they're kind of not exclusively theirs, but predominantly theirs. And she said to me recently, she said, they're so used to kind of getting out a Chromebook and just typing away. And sometimes I do just want them to sit and actually be with their thoughts and just handwrite some stuff rather than use the computer. I mean, I know, again, the whole idea of handwriting is sort of becoming more and more obsolete, as it were, but for now it does still exist, and there is still an element of having things in books, which is quite nice, I find as well. And
There
my
is. There's an
yeah.
argument for both, isn't there? I mean, there was a show recently that I remember talking on about, and we were talking about tech in schools and things. And there's that research saying that if you write things down and it helps to improve your working memory, or it stays in your working memory longer if you're writing things down rather than typing things. But again, it's about balance, isn't it? So as we sort of look ahead, then it is likely that we are going to be using keyboards more, and there is going to be less need for handwritten work. But in terms of input and in terms of learning and receiving knowledge, and I think handwritten stuff or writing by hand is still essential.
Oh, most definitely. I would wholeheartedly agree with that. Another 2023 trend, supposedly, well, according to Moonpreneur at least, is the rise of STEAM-based programs. So for those of you, I mean, you're all au fait with this, but for those of you who don't know, science, technology, engineering, arts and maths, or I also thought it was and maths, but this is an American article, so forgive me. But okay, saying that the 21st century has obviously seen some drastic changes, and that these subjects are still very much sort of put on the back burner a lot. Certainly, I mean, obviously, well, maths is taught every day, but certainly I felt in some of the primary schools I worked in that the science teaching is maybe not, or certainly my science teaching at least, has not been as strong as it could be. And it's important that a STEAM-based curriculum is something that can be followed, and that they're not just taught as kind of a sort of side thing, that actually children are taught to ask questions, how to experiment, how to create, innovate, how to test hypotheses, variables, etc., things like that, because it's and I certainly think that primary has a massive role to play here, in that we need to liaise more with our secondary colleagues, of course easier said than done, about how we can improve all the teaching of all these things from sort of early days. There are things that we can do from EYFS all the way through, obviously, and beyond secondary. But I certainly think that I mean, I know it's been on the agenda for a while, but it hasn't really sort of experienced a massive push that I've seen in a while. And Mark, I don't know if you agree or disagree with that.
Yeah, no, I think it's certainly for primary. I mean, it's kind of in place really in secondary, isn't it? Where you've got the core subjects, and all of those are taught at a sort of a higher rate or a higher consistency throughout the timetable. But in primary, certainly, I think there's a call for it, isn't there? My background, as I said earlier, is in primary, and as a PPA teacher, I was invariably left with doing the science lessons in the afternoon, because the class teacher would not really want to do it. So generally speaking, anyway. So if it's more of a core subject, as it were, then I think that's all the more good for that.
Fantastic. Now, there's sort of a few of these points kind of smush together, and I've also kind of gathered this as well from where is it? Honestly, too many bits of paper. I need to stop doing this. For trends shaping education as well. And again, I'll post all this because there's a lot of reading material here. I will post all of this in my show notes for you to read at your leisure. And what the Trends report has done is actually created 4 different scenarios of where schooling could go in the future. And this actually matches quite nicely with this Moonpreneur article as well. So see what you think about this. I mean, do I necessarily think that these things in some cases are already happening, but are they going to kind of take over traditional schooling in 2023? Arguably not, but I think they're hot on the heels. And that's so some examples here: a subscription-based model for learning. So that's going to be something that people subscribe to, maybe not so much at the younger level, but maybe more sort of towards university level, degree level, and beyond. And the idea is that you pay a subscription and you essentially learn what you want. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, that's something that's in place again already in some secondaries. Certainly the one I'm working at the moment, we use Bedrock Learning for year 7. Well, it's only year 7 now actually, because it's proved too expensive to carry it on through year 8 and 9. But there is that. So each child has their account, each student has their account, and they work through to their ability, and it's a progressive system, and they work to their ability. And there are incentives as well. So again, it kind of comes back into that kind of gaming element as well. So there are programs in place for that, and they do seem to be quite effective. The kids do get quite competitive about it.
Yeah, I mean, I know something that exists here, and I know it's starting to exist more and more around the world, is where, education is outsourced, or you have more of a kind of learning hub situation where children and young people essentially create their own. They work from home, they create their own curriculum. The tutors are all available online, so they're able to do all their learning in their own way, at their own pace, their own time, and it's schooling, but it's not going to school in the traditional sense. And I didn't know this was a thing until quite recently. Again, being in an international environment, I wonder if that's why it's kind of something that I'm more aware of. But also in the wake of COVID, and having this online availability, and having goodness knows how many platforms like Zoom, Google Meets. I mean, I couldn't even list them all. Microsoft Teams. I mean, there are so many at this point. It's quite unbelievable. But the idea that you can now tailor your education in such a way, I suppose, does have plus points. But the worry for me would be that these children are then missing out on that social environment, that classroom space, that interaction with other children. Arguably, that could come from going and doing sporting activities, going and doing various hobbies. But Mark, I'd be interested to know kind of where you sit on the idea of personalized curriculum and sort of at-home tuition.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the at-home aspect. I mean, if there's a balance between, like you said, online learning. I suppose in online learning, we all had the kind of breakout groups and that kind of stuff when we were doing that. But the collaborative approach then in that sense would be good. I do quite like that kind of bespoke idea. It's I remember a few years ago, again when I was working in primary, I was chatting to a guy who was an education consultant in Finland, and the project-based learning that they have there, it just did sound much more creative, I think. So the kids will get they can kind of focus on the area that they're more interested in, but they will have to incorporate the other elements to make sure that their education is holistic and it's well rounded, and they are getting all of the input from all the subjects. But it just, I mean, and obviously we've all seen the results and the grades and everything else that are coming out of Finland. So it does seem to be working. So it's just an interesting idea, I think. But yeah, to have it kind of solely based online, I'm not entirely sure that is, like you say, beneficial in terms of social skills and
Yeah.
other activities and skills-based stuff in terms of arts and sports as well.
I mean, there is a suggestion on this list as well that says the list from Moonpreneur, which suggests that hybrid learning could be something as well. I mean, again, I don't know how that would work. It would certainly need to be something that would be realistic for teachers as well, because I remember sort of as we were kind of coming back into school and there were still children off and there were people getting sick, teachers getting sick still on quite a regular basis. That the idea of kind of trying to do two jobs where you've got the kids who are at home and the kids who are in class, and to try and kind of balance that and mark all the work and all that, it just wasn't. We ended up at school kind of having quite a lot of discussions about it, because it quickly transpired that was not realistic. That the idea is that if we teachers are in school, then we are teaching the children that are at school. Those who are at home, we can, send work if they're just isolating because someone in their house is unwell, or if they were sick, then the policy was that no, sorry, you are off sick. But it took quite a bit of kind of ironing that out. So I think if you were going to go for a hybrid approach, or certainly if that is something that is going to be the idea going forward, it would need to be management teams at school and teachers themselves would need to be very clear that the workload and how that works is realistic.
Yeah, it sounds way too overcomplicated. I mean, the hybrid learning was an absolute nightmare during lockdown. Kids in the smaller classes, it wasn't too bad. So, like in sixth form classes, for example, I'd get students on laptops and like put the laptop with the group, or they'd be taking part in the lesson in that way, and their face would be there and they could be chatting away. But it wasn't entirely, it just didn't really work, did it? So it would have to be, if you're going to do hybrid learning, perhaps they mean where there is an element where everybody is working online at one stage and then everybody is working in the classroom together after that. That sounds more sensible, perhaps.
I mean, I know that there's been a lot of discussion recently about flexi working for teachers. I know Hannah Bradley, who was in the space earlier, has actually written articles on this, and I will again try and dig that out for my show notes as well, because I think it's sort of it ties into this in a way. I mean, I don't know if I'm making sort of tenuous links or not, but if you're going to have a situation where pupils are both online and at school, then arguably you should have the same situation for teachers. Or do you have one set of teachers who are in school and one who work from home? I mean, the staffing and the organization of it, I mean, just thinking about it now, as you said, Mark, I mean, it's giving me a headache just trying to imagine how that would work. I think it could, but I think it would need a lot of, and it would need to be watertight as well. It would absolutely need to be, and I think the students would have to be very, very trustworthy in that respect, because I certainly know, I mean, again, I was teaching year 5 at the time. In lockdown, towards the end of the second one out here, the drivel that I was getting handed in. But in fairness to them, when I think back on it, was I at peak teacher level, having been indoors for however long it had been at that point? No, probably not. So to be expecting a high standard of work being handed in, yeah, okay, yeah, I should have been expected a high standard, but I think it was clear that everybody was tapped out. So I think it would also have to be ensuring that standards are adhered to, and that a certain level has to be met in order for a class to be passed, or a certain grade to be given.
Yeah, I also think that, I mean, the sort of working conditions in lockdown as well for staff and for students, that it did. Not everybody was kind of suffering from it. I think some people did thrive on it, and it did benefit some people, that working in their own time, in some kind of like isolation as well. I think there were students who flourished under that, and some teachers as well who preferred that as well. So maybe there is a call for that to try and bring out the best in everybody. So maybe perhaps a sense of hybrid, in the sense that rather than having that mixed lesson where you've got half the class online and half the class in the classroom, but you do a lesson online and then a lesson in the classroom, so that there could be a kind of a balance there, perhaps.
I mean, I drew the line at being filmed in class, because I just found the whole idea incredibly weird. And then of course you get into the whole idea of, oh well, you've got certain kids in class who maybe can't be shown live online, or how do you show it where you're showing you and not there? Oh, anyway, anywho, another thing that which you've already touched on, which is a prediction for 2023, is the emphasis on holistic learning. So the changing scenarios of education have shifted the focus, ensuring that we're sort of talking about whole child and a more sort of, well, they've said holistic again, where they grow up to become responsible individuals with an appropriate skill set. And actually, one of the previous articles I looked at said that her research focus was going to be on, I can't find the correct part at this point. What did she say? She said strengthening the fabric of global education, and a more kind of outward facing approach, rather than sort of, yes, we need to focus on the locale and on our local communities as well, but also kind of reaching out into the wider world as well. And holistic learning has immense benefits. Students are empowered to improve their education outcomes, gain the life skills necessary to take on a successful professional career. And certainly through the enrichment program I've been teaching at the moment, which I kind of call Curriculum Plus, if you like, we're able to teach children sort of all sorts of things that they wouldn't necessarily do in kind of day-to-day traditional schooling. And that's kind of, again, I think come about as an idea sort of post-COVID, where we can do more with our day. I mean, obviously the day-to-day subjects, the reading, writing, arithmetic, is never, that's never going to go down the list in any way, but it's nice to be able to, like I did a whole thing on podcast and radio, actually, funnily enough, using clips from my from carefully selected shows as an example to show my children how to create a podcast, which was lovely. I mean, how that's going to serve them in the wider world, I don't know. But one of the kids came up to me today and told me it was their favourite of the enrichments that they did this term. So that was something.
Excellent. Well, that's you're presenting modelling good behaviour, aren't you? You're saying, right, this is what I do. Well, no, you are. It's great for them to see, what you do outside of the classroom. I think it gives them, it helps to connect, doesn't it?
Yeah, to show that we are, because I'm still convinced that some of my children think I sleep under my desk.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I think
it's that moment when they see you outside of school and go, you don't permanently stay in the classroom.
Oh, no, I know. But I think the idea of, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I think that certainly lends itself, or like logistically, again, I think it would be easier in primary to do that. I think you've got more scope, more flexibility to perhaps to do that. I think, again, it comes back to what I was saying before about easing up on the content in the curricula for secondary to allow time to do that as well, without kind of detracting from those basic skills. But it is the knowledge skills argument, essentially, isn't it? It's giving kids the opportunity to learn skills, a variety of skills, or at least to be able to sort of see something that they perhaps wouldn't have seen before, and they can make up their own minds about it. But like you said, if students are saying that's the best one that they've seen, it might hit the mark for some of those students.
But I think as well,
no, go on. Sorry.
No, I was going to let you finish. Sorry.
No, I kind of had, so go on.
Sorry. I think things are coming into my brain. It's actually gone. Oh no, what I was going to say is that, sort of piggybacking onto the idea that there's so much content, and actually, are we sending these kids into the world with real life skills and things like, things that they actually need, like financial literacy and, some ideas of maybe what they want to do post 18, whether it is university or whether they do want to go and try their hand at apprenticeships or something like that. So, I think that I still cling on to the idea of what you said before, of maybe there's hope that actually this will be addressed and we can hopefully move towards a future where maybe exams are less of a thing. I mean, I was never an exam person. I don't know about you.
Yeah, no, not at all. Yeah, no, I actually agree. So I remember, it must have been 2 years ago now, when I was doing the Year 11 GCSE spoken word assessment, and a large majority of the students were talking about, obviously, the focus was on lockdown and the impact that had on their education, and their concerns and their worries and all the issues that they had with it. And the message that I tried to relay to them. So there's a Q&A session at the end of it. And I said to them, well, imagine yourself in a job interview in 4 years' time, 5 years' time, when you've completed your A-levels, you've completed your degree. They say, well, the GCSEs we're doing, they're not as worth as much because, we've been taught under lockdown and we haven't done as much as people before us and probably people after us, that kind of thing. And so, well, if I'm an employer and I'm looking at you and what you've done and what you're capable of, and I can see again, it comes back to that resilience word, but it does. I said, this was my message to them, was that I would be, if it was a neck and neck situation, chances are I would opt for them, and I would employ them because they have managed to achieve what they have under those circumstances.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's going to have to be something that employers do acknowledge and understand going forward, is that certainly the students coming through now and in years to come have missed out on crucial things. And it's, it may be that, I mean, certainly in sort of my generation, I look back on it now quite fondly, in that, quite a few of us, or a large proportion of us, went to university. We'd all kind of, done a little bit of sort of voluntary work, traveling, and nothing really set us apart. It was kind of, and I remember, and I've joked about this before on TTR, sort of coming out of university with a gross sense of entitlement, being like, well, I've got a degree. Why won't someone employ me? I've done the work. And it was incredibly humbling in that first sort of couple of years outside of university. Like, oh, there is really nothing that makes me different. Whereas I think these kids now do have it much tougher, but I think that from the young people I've spoken to, that they're going to turn their experiences and they're able to articulate it in such a way, the example with those English assessments that you just said, to say, you know, yeah, this happened, yes, it sucked, but I'm still going for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's something, like I said, it shows the for those kids who have come through it and they are able to articulate that as well. You know, it really does show that they are resilient and they are the exams. I wouldn't say they're more, well, in some ways they are more valuable because they've managed to achieve through all the issues and the problems that we had during lockdown.
Yeah, you know, shone in the face of adversity for sure, particularly after Algorithm Gate. I mean, my goodness me, the less said about that, the better, I think. But so we've covered a lot of ground already, but I don't think we can let this show end, Mark. And this is something you have touched on already, without talking about, and this is kind of a slight about turn, not really related to anything else, talking about some of the edu Twitter debacles of 2022, of which there have been a few. And I don't know whether, dear listeners, how you were involved in these or saw any of these, but some memorable ones include whiteboard gates. Mark, I don't know where you sat on whiteboard gates.
I was kind of indifferent, to be honest with you. I think that there is a place for them, but I think the kind of mandatory use, they must be used in every lesson, is a bit ridiculous and far-fetched, just out of practical terms, to be honest.
Yes, I mean, if you saw the state of some of mine, and the rate at which kids go through these whiteboard pens.
Well, the pens is the big issue, isn't it?
The pens. We've got some particularly shoddy ones at the moment, but what my kids really like to do with whiteboards, and I'm giving people ideas here, but if you put the pen in the middle and then spin the whiteboard, that is honestly, if I could leave them in a room for hours doing that, and it creates a spiral shape. They love it. I don't know what the fascination is.
It's creative. It's artistic. They're expressing their creativity.
Yes, usually in the middle of a maths lesson. But yes,
it depends on the quality of whiteboard. So the school I was at before, they were fairly kind of cheap and flimsy ones, and they could be used as wobble boards. So that was always trying. Like, no, just put it down, leave it alone. You just have like 30 Rolf Harrises in the class, just wobbling them, flipping whiteboards. So
I was shocked at how tribal that argument actually became. Like, there were some people who were absolutely adamant that, you know, a classroom without whiteboards, well, then you're clearly, shouldn't be doing the job. Were you privy to Pengate at all?
I don't know. This isn't about pen licenses, is it?
No, this was a kickoff that was about, if a kid comes to a lesson without a pen, should a teacher give them a pen? And again, a very mixed bag of responses on this. I think this tends to be more of a secondary issue with kids moving between classes, because usually as a primary teacher, they're usually using pencil until they get pen licenses. But the idea that you have in secondary school, for example, or in a year 7, year 8, whatever lesson it is, that a child comes to class for whatever reason, and there could be any number of reasons they don't have a pen. The sort of the idea that you'd refuse to give them a pen to teach them a lesson just seemed a bit extraordinary to me. Then surely you'd rather loan a child a pen for that lesson so they can be productive in that lesson than have them sitting there either, feeling quite ashamed in a corner or raising hell because they don't know what else to do.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. There's I know several schools that I've worked at and trained at have this kind of policy of they call it the Big Seven. I think they have to have pen, pencil sharp, the whole kit, basically a pencil case with this set number of items in it. And if they don't, then it's a negative point, perhaps on the behaviour chart system, that kind of thing. They have to go and get one or buy one from somewhere within the school. But to be honest with you, I'm a big softie, and I'll just say no. Ask to borrow one first. If nobody else has a spare one, then I give them a pen. So I've got a box of spares in my desk, and like you said, it's pointless and fruitless, and it's wasting their lesson time as well. Invariably, it's the kids who need to have that time. They need to, they're the ones who don't need to be. They shouldn't be at the lesson for any longer than they need to, than they should be, or they need to be. So, yeah, I'll just give them the pen.
My favourite Twitter kickoff of this year, and again, I don't know if you saw this one, was when you can call yourself a teacher. So the idea behind this one was that you are only a teacher for as long as you are a practitioner in a classroom. And outside of that, if you retire or decide to leave the profession or whatever it is, you are no longer a teacher. And again, this went completely bananas and got quite ugly in some corners of Twitter. So I don't know where you sit on that one, Mark, or whether you saw any of that in 2022.
I didn't know. I don't know where I've been. I've missed a lot of this. I remember the whiteboard
You clearly
thing,
have a
but
life.
I did have, again, on one of these shows, I had a conversation about this, and we were talking about education consultants and the value. I know I'm probably going to be treading on toes here, and I do apologize if anybody is an education consultant listening in, but it's from the experience, if people aren't in the classroom, I don't know, you can call yourself a teacher or an ex-teacher, certainly, but if you're going to be going around and telling people how to do things in the classroom, I think you need to be still working in the classroom in some shape or form. That's, again, it's my personal opinion, but I think it does shift and it does change. And, if for example, you've got a consultant who hasn't been teaching over the last 2 or 3 years, and they haven't experienced lockdown, they haven't lockdown teach online teaching, they haven't experienced post-lockdown teaching, and they're going and saying, right, you need to do this, this, and this. I don't think teachers are really going to give them the respect that, somebody who has been through that or is doing that, they wouldn't give them the same time of day, I don't think. So I think there's definitely a case for, I don't know, I think you have to be clear saying that if you want to say that you're an ex-teacher, I think is acceptable. Part-time or teacher / something if you're still part-time teaching and part-time doing something else.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't actually thought about that side of it. I think the way I'd kind of come at it was, well, I bust a gut for that qualification. Therefore, until I get the equivalent of disbarred in teaching, then I am a teacher. But that's very kind of sort of a dark way to look at it. But actually, when you take a more sensible approach, where you sort of say, well, maybe you have been a teacher and you've sidestepped into something else, then are you still a teacher in the traditional sense? Arguably not. And of course, it's very easy to become, and very quick to become, out of touch in this profession.
Yeah, or do we see teaching as, like, I don't know, without trying to be too flippant about it, but people who've quit smoking, they still say, well, I'm a smoker, but I've quit. Or an alcoholic say, well, I'm an alcoholic, but is it that kind of a thing? Once you are that, you are always that. You will always have that element of the role about you. I don't know.
I do think you remain, and I've talked to friends who are either on sabbaticals or taking a break from teaching or have since left. You do remain institutionalized for quite a while, apparently. Like the idea of kind of the fact that, you don't have to time going for a wee, or that you don't have to have lunch at 12:30 takes quite a while to sort of unwind from.
And I think always you do have the teacher stare or teacher voice out and about as well. It happened to me the other day in the cinema. Somebody was kicking the back of my chair, and in my very most teacherly voice, I said, please, would you mind not kicking my chair? Thank you. Just kind of threw my head back, this voice out into the void of the cinema behind me. I don't know who it was. I didn't make eye contact, but you do have those. Yeah, so go on.
No, I was going to say, I hope they were quaking in their boots.
Well, they didn't kick me after that, so it was, it was effective, if nothing else.
Jeff Pedley wants to know, can he call himself a teacher yet? Certainly not, young man. I I don't know what you do on a daily basis, Jeff. I know you kind of it's something to do with, well, I know you're in Belgium doing something, but is it teaching? I don't really know. I'm winding you up, Jeff. You are very much a teacher and a fellow host on Teachers Talk Radio, so that's nice as well. So double whammy. But I'm trying to think if there are any other debacles on Twitter. Just those were the three that kind of stuck out to me. And there's always something, and I'm sure going into 2023 there'll be things that will pop up and that we'll discuss. And it's I mean, as we say on Teachers Talk Radio, we want kind of healthy conversation and healthy debate. What we don't want is people getting a bit too militant and a bit too high horse about it, which I think can happen in certain corners. But for the most part, I think the community is pretty good. Oh, I've just seen that the lovely Kelly would like to hop in. So Kelly, you should be able to speak any moment now. Hopefully this will work.
Hello there. Lovely to check in with you both. You've just both actually got me thinking in terms of, can I call myself a teacher if? And I think that, you know, our role is so ever changing, isn't it? You know, there's such a trajectory, isn't there? So, you know, you mentioned, you know, if you haven't been teaching during COVID, well, you weren't in the battlefield with everybody doing that. So, you know, do you really understand the reality? And now are you staring down the, you know, the barrel of AI that's flying at us, you know? So I think it's actually a really interesting question. It's just really got me thinking about, you know, these people that do go off and be, you know, work in other roles. Are they still a teacher, or is it that something that stays with us forever? And is the role changing all the time, you know?
I mean, I think you make a wonderful point there, Kelly. And I think, I mean, I'm in my 30s now, and even I struggle to keep up. And I kind of, you know, it was in the back end of my teens as a lot of this stuff was starting, and it is hard to keep up. And I think, as you say, the role is changing so much and going forward into 2023 and beyond, with this idea of, well, now that we know we can online teach, now that we know that all this and all these various apps and the gamification, now we know that all this stuff exists, unless you are CPD'd up to the eyeballs in this, can you cope in this profession going forward? And should it be that is the baseline for being in this profession, when there's so much other stuff that does absolutely make you a teacher? And, you know, do you have to be on board with this stuff? Does the career depend on it? I don't know what the answer to that is at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it depends on the role that you're in, and potentially if you're interviewing for new roles, and what new workplaces are hoping that you can bring to the table, or if you've stayed in a school for 30 years and, you know, are people still expecting you to continue to evolve, or are they happy for you to stay, you know, kind of doing your thing, and that's what you've always done? So, yeah, it's just it's a really good question. I just wanted to check in with you guys. It's actually got me thinking about what we could infer teaching to mean, and what is a teacher, and it's always changing, isn't it? So, yeah, it was just an interesting thought. I hope you don't mind me buzzing in there, but yeah.
Not at all. We actively encourage it, and I'm always happy for people to buzz in. So Kelly, actually, I really appreciate it, and hopefully you'll pop into some more shows, and, you know, never know, be a guest one day as well. Because something I haven't mentioned actually today is that we are continuing to look for hosts actually going forward, and guests as well on Teachers Talk Radio. And actually, we want to talk to as many on the ground teachers as possible. You are the people who Teachers Talk Radio is about at the end of the day, the people who are doing it for real every day, day in, day out. And the large majority, or the vast majority of the hosts are teachers themselves. I'm a teacher. Jeff, although I've told him he's not a teacher, Jeff is most definitely a teacher. And we all teach in kind of different ways, different parts of the world as well, which is fantastic. And it makes Teachers Talk Radio what it is. And we talk about things that are of interest to us, but we're also open to subject suggestions from our listeners as well. And I think it's really important that we are receptive to that. So if you fancy being in the chair, as it were, do get in touch with Teachers Talk Radio via Twitter. Just send the account a direct message, and you'll get a host information pack with all the lovely details of what it's like to be a host for Teachers Talk Radio and where it can take you. And I've definitely had a fantastic 18 months or so, I think it's been now, doing this. So I would actively encourage you, if you are someone who likes to share your thoughts with anyone who will listen, like me, then please do get in touch with us. So I think we do need to wrap up a little bit because I am conscious of time. So we've sort of done a very kind of roundabout tour through 2022, looking at the different issues that have arisen. Don't know if we'd answered any of the big questions that we've had, but we've certainly contemplated them, and we've certainly suggested that there are things that still need looking at in terms of curriculum, in terms of where we are as teachers ourselves. And going forward into 2023, looking at the idea that maybe traditional schooling as it stands is not the answer. Maybe there are different situations, different scenarios of hybrid learning or online learning or subscription-based learning that are going to become more prevalent. I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I don't think it's going to be something that replaces traditional education entirely, but I do think it's worth being mindful that these things do exist and that we need to be aware that, you know, the use of tech, as Kelly has identified, is increasing all the time, and that if we are able to stay on top of it, we should. But it's certainly interesting to think about the idea of whether that is going to determine who can work in teaching and who can't. So some food for thought there, perhaps.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.